Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Christine Verret, client partner at Radix, and today I will be your host for today's webinar on discovering AI use cases for life sciences. If at any point during the presentation you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat. My colleague Julia will monitor the chat, and she will also make sure that we address them either during or after the presentation. For those who have not worked with us before, we at Radix help companies design, build, and scale impactful AI solutions. We do this in three ways. First, helping organizations discover opportunities for AI. Second, with our team of machine learning, software engineers, UX, UI designers, we design, build, and deliver AI solutions. And then finally, we also help organizations who are looking to build AI teams by providing training and coaching. Today, we will zoom in on this first part, and we will show you our approach as well as some use cases for AI in life sciences. Why are we sharing this with you today? Many organizations struggle to bring AI solutions into a production stage. They say that on average, only about 16% of AI proof of concepts generally make it into production. And over the past 2.5, 3 years, we have helped organizations across different industries, and more than 60% of our AI solutions have already made it into production. Together with the clients that we've worked with, we gathered our lessons learned into a framework which is called Fast Discovery. And this is a framework that can help you identify AI use cases that have the most chance to succeed. So identify use cases, assess whether your organization is ready to start implementing AI and what you need to be able to get there. And today we also want to share these lessons learned with you by focusing on the life sciences industry. We'll guide you through our approach, and towards the end of the webinar, we will also go into detail on some examples of use cases for different areas like drug development and clinical trials, patient experience, and drug manufacturing. But before we move on, maybe just a few words on how we define artificial intelligence. So AI is an umbrella term for different technologies related to the automation of tasks. And within AI, the majority of the work is called machine learning. So in this, again, umbrella term of techniques, we give an algorithm many examples of a desired behavior. And over time, the algorithm learns to replicate that behavior in new examples. Within machine learning, over the recent years, there has been a lot of attention to the domain of deep learning, which has proven to work well in, for example, natural language processing, which is a term for different techniques that involve the interpretation of human language. And also in computer vision, so this is again an umbrella term for different techniques involving the interpretation of images. There are also other techniques that we consider part of the domain of artificial intelligence. For example, operations research. This is a technique where we take a declarative approach. So instead of feeding examples to the algorithm, you feed the outcome you want to achieve, and then the algorithm tries to find the best solution to reach that outcome. This is something that is very often used in a manufacturing or logistics context. When we look at what AI can contribute to pharma, there are many opportunities. There has been a lot of work by large corporations to try to understand how the human body works completely, using AI to predict the best diagnosis or the best treatment to suit this patient. But next to these very complex use cases, I would even call them moonshots, which require a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of money. We believe that there are also more tangible use cases that different organizations can get started with. So the development, production, and sales of medicines and vaccines is very complex, very regulated. And there are lots of manual workloads in information gathering, data interpretation, reporting, planning, quality control. And the reason why I mentioned these processes, that's not a coincidence. So these are areas where AI has a lot of opportunities to function as a co-pilot for the human worker, So really helping the human worker to do their job better, to automate some of the boring tasks so that the human can focus on the more creative parts. Before diving into the how-to of fast discovery, here is where we are going. So we will go in more detail on the use cases that you now see on the screen. But in short, we will take a step back. We will look at the organization as a whole to understand the different processes, different stakeholders, different end users. So we can first understand what drives value in the organization. For example, also what are the main cost drivers, where are the bottlenecks of manual effort, where is a lot of time lost because we're waiting for certain processes. Once we've done that, we have a solid basis which will help us ideate. So listing up different opportunities, thinking how can AI improve this particular process. And then as a combined team, so having people from our clients present, having people from Radix or Radix engineers present, we will together assess what is the business value and what is the implementation complexity of such solutions. In your registration form, we asked you to provide some information about your organization, and we used this information to build an example company for this demo. So let's have a look at the strategy statement for this example company. So our aim is to be an efficient medicines company, leveraging data and AI to improve patient quality of life and access to quality medicine. So we can highlight some evidence here that helps us understand what drives value in this example organization. So for example, we see the word efficient, we see quality of life, we see access to quality medicine. So this will help us understand what drives value in the organization. We believe that every organization's objectives are a combination of 5 elements: increasing sales, increase customer satisfaction, reduce costs, reduce effort, and reduce throughput time. And the weight of these 5 elements is different for each industry and even for each company. So that means that when we look at the business impact of the solutions that we will show to you later on, this impact will be specific for each company. So we need to keep that in mind when we prioritize. Based on the answers in your registration form again, we will zoom in today on decreased throughput time, decreased cost, and increased customer satisfaction, which for a life science company, we could translate, for example, into efficiency in bringing medicines to the markets by identifying targets faster, reducing downtime and waste in production, and improve patient safety and self-management. Next, we also asked you which stakeholders you want to understand better. So we look at how these different stakeholder groups operate, who do they interact with, what data do they use, what outcome do they want to achieve. And based on that, so we have selected different end users that we want to look at. So for example, the patient, the R&D scientists, and for each of these, we have identified a number of need statements. So what is it that, that this stakeholder, this user group wants to achieve? Well, now that we have this information, so we understand better what it is that our patients, our scientists, our manufacturers want to achieve, we will move on to ideation. So ideation means helping participants think of new solutions. And this is really where the combination of your business and industry experience and our AI expertise work together. So while your business experts draw out the opportunities for improvement for each of our stakeholders, our machine learning experts will think at the same time. So they will take these ideas and link them together with the AI techniques that need to be used to build this kind of solution. So on the screen right now, you see a video. I realize it's quite small, but what's happening here is in the middle, you see the need statements that we just produced in what I showed you on the previous slide. So what is it that our users want to achieve? Around that, the team is coming up with different solutions. So that's what's highlighted in green. So the green cards are the different solutions that the team came up with. And at the same time, our engineers are linking these opportunities together with the corresponding AI task. So those are the yellow cards that you see around. So if it's not readable, don't worry, we'll go into some of these use cases later on as well. So at the end of your ideation exercise, you might have now 20, 30 different use cases, but you haven't validated yet whether they are the right thing to do for your organization or for the current climate for this point in time. Is it the right thing to start developing these kind of solutions? So what we do next is we go through each of the ideas and we score them according to, on one side, the business value, and on the other side, the implementation complexity. So what is most interesting at the moment, so what we want to focus on is then the top two categories. So on one side, in the top left corner, you can see the low-hanging fruits. So these are the high-value, low-complexity use cases. And these are the use cases that that an organization that's just getting started with AI, those are the best for such an organization to get started with. On the other side, we see the strategic initiatives. So these are the high value, high complexity use cases. And these are processes that typically take a longer time. So there might be very complex techniques involved, different data sources that need to be prepared. And what we see very often is that once you get these use cases right, there are many other possibilities and you will create a much higher impact because of all that's possible now. So let's just make this a bit more concrete. So for example, when we invest in one solution, let's say in natural language processing, we need to fine tune a language model to understand the life sciences context, to understand that specific language. And this will help you get started with other NLP opportunities as well. Okay, let's now move on to some use cases. So we have prepared a number of example use cases. So this is not an exhaustive list. There is a lot more, but these are a few that we believe have high value in the life sciences industry. We divided them in 3 categories. So the first one being personalized healthcare and experience, which is what I will go into detail now. Later on, we will also look at a few examples in drug development and a few examples in drug manufacturing. So within the personalized healthcare and experience, we could look, for example, at a consumer healthcare context. We could imagine that users complain on social media and they have different questions, different issues, and we want to be able to identify trends and identify areas for improvement. So this would correspond to a subdomain of natural language processing called topic analysis. Taking it one step further, still in natural language processing, we could help with the triage and processing of adverse event reports. So a patient has a side effect of a certain drug that he's taking and needs to report this to the pharmaceutical company. So when these reports come in, it's important that we know immediately how crucial is this, has this issue occurred before? So an expert that is processing this case could really benefit from a database where the previously reported issues are present so that they can see, have we already answered this question or have we already seen this adverse event before, or is it a new issue that we just find out now? And here we can think of NLP techniques like document classification and question answering. Also in personalized healthcare, wearables have been on the rise for a few years, and there have been major improvements in these wearables that now also help them to do safety monitoring. So providing early warnings, early intervention for patients with, for example, epilepsy, or glucose monitoring for diabetes patients, heart conditions, etc. And for these kind of warnings, to provide a warning before the incident occurs, we could use a technique called time series analysis. Let's zoom in now on one of the cases. So here I've taken the example of the triaging of adverse event reports. So to build a running pilot, we would estimate that this could take between 2 and 4 months of development time, more or less. So provided that the historic data is easily accessible, this would be rather on the lower end, but keeping in mind the complexity, we prefer to give a broader time scope as well. By comparing the experience that we have with a similar case that we did in a different sector, we would estimate that about 50% of time per case can be saved by using document classification and question answering. So also many hospitalizations due to adverse events are actually preventable. Some journals say even up to 70%. I've seen other numbers more along the lines of 30, 40% as well. But in any case, by better understanding the historic data, you can take better actions to improve the safety of patients. Next, in a drug development context, we've also proposed here 3 example use cases that we will explain in a bit more detail. So again, here we see many opportunities, this time more focused on reducing throughput time, so reducing the time that it takes for a drug to get on the market, and reducing costs. And yeah, just so you know, under drug development, we count processes like drug discovery, clinical trials, and regulatory approval. And a first example here, using computer vision techniques, like for example, instance segmentation. That's a technique that we could use to analyze lab samples for bacterial colonies. And such a solution could be up to 6 times faster and more accurate than a lab technician as well. So if you're interested in learning more about these kinds of cases, we have already worked together with GSK, and we've presented this together at a webinar as well. So I will just ask my colleague Julia to share the link in the chat in case anyone is interested. Yes, thank you. A second use case that we believe has high impact is the use of text summarization to compile reports or to compile documents like meeting transcripts, clinical trial results. So what we see here is that there are huge amounts of information that we need to read, compile, bring together into a summary. So using techniques like text summarization, sentence classification, topic analysis, we can help to build these summaries in a more automatic way. And a third high impact use case that we identified here is AI-driven matching of patients with clinical trials. So for example, what we could do is by doing domain-aware information retrieval. So instead of using simple keyword matching, we could match together different medical terms, medical codes as well, or different descriptions of the same pathology to be able to find matching patients in a faster way. So again, let's zoom in a little bit more about one of these cases. If we want to get started with text summarization, we would need two types of data. On one side, we need the data that we want to summarize. So that could be, for example, meeting transcripts, scientific reports, clinical trial outcomes. You could think of many other data sources that would be applicable. And what's also very helpful is to have an existing gold standard or the output format that we want to get to. So depending whether we have this gold standard, again, the time to get to first results could be different, could be a lot shorter if we have that. The techniques, as I mentioned, that we use for such a solution are again in the natural language processing space. So text summarization is a technique that allows to aggregate large sections of text in a shorter way. So either by picking the most informative sentences or by rewriting the sentences in a more concise way. And next to sentence summarization or text summarization, we also need other techniques to make this function better. So for example, we could use sentence classification to understand whether a sentence that we see in one of the data sources belongs rather to a description of results or to a conclusion, for example. Or we could use topic analysis, which you've already seen before in the social media case. Here we can identify which topics are present in the text so that we can aggregate them from different texts into one document where everything is in the same place. Again, we estimate that the time saved of such a solution could be huge. We would say, based on results of a similar case that we worked on, this would be up to 60% time saved in interpreting and summarizing the content. So there, again, this is not a process that will be fully automated, but it's something that where AI can really help as or function as a co-pilot to help people get the information that needs to be written in the text format a lot faster. Then when we look at drug manufacturing, here there are also a lot of opportunities. So in manufacturing, what we want to achieve is we want to optimize the yield, so optimize the amount of products that are being produced by reducing the downtime of the machines, reducing the amount of material that goes to waste, for example, material that expires because we ordered it in too large quantities. And of course, we also want to improve the quality of the product. So we want to ensure are all the products fabricated according to the same standards? Are they packaged in the right way? And there are different techniques where AI can help to improve that. So let's start again with a simpler case. So a first one that we could think of is production planning optimization. So I will show this in a bit more detail in a minute as well. So here we could use techniques from computer vision, like object detection. No, I'm skipping to the next one. Sorry about that. Yeah, here we could use operations research to come up with this better production planning. The next use case that we could look at is quality control for products and packaging. So for example, if we want to count that the number of pills in a bottle or in a blister pack is correct, or whether the product is correctly sealed, we could use a technique called object detection. And then a third use case, which is a more complex one, but I believe that this is one that has a very high impact. So to avoid the downtime of machines, we could look at information retrieval techniques. So we could, for example, build a search solution that gathers historic data on production issues, which can then help troubleshoot and solve problems faster. So if we see a problem with a certain machine we know that this issue has occurred in the past, but we don't know how to solve this, by using information retrieval, we could look at past reports, past error logs, and we will know faster what the problem is and what the solution would be. So then, as promised, our last our last solution deep dive will look at the optimization of production planning. And as I said, to do this, we would use a technique called operations research. So we would start with inventory data, the production capacities, and order management data. So these three data sources would be used for that. We build a solution, or we feed this data and the outcome that we want to achieve. So when the product needs to be finished, and based on that, the algorithm will decide what is the best planning, when does which product need to be developed. And such a solution could be up to 95% faster than a human planner. So again, based on a similar use case that we've done in a similar, in a different sector. So this could be, the planning could be a lot faster, but also a lot more accurate. So we could, for example, estimate the delivery time more accurately, avoid delays in production. So the benefits there would be huge for the transparency of when which product will be delivered. And this brings us to the end of today's presentation. So what we did today, we started out by bringing a holistic view of the organization, identify where AI can bring impact, and we evaluated the opportunities for AI according to their implementation complexity and business impact. And we showed this based on a number of examples. I'd like to thank you for participating in our call today. We will now take some time to address any questions that you might still have. And if you'd like to follow up separately, feel free to send me an email. You can find my email address at the bottom of the screen, and I'd be happy to set up a call to talk further. There's a question from Cyril. What do you mean by first results and pilot? So why our first results would they be ready after 3 to 5 weeks and a pilot up to 5 months? So what I mean with that is if we look at first results, this would be really testing, like, is it achievable? Do we have, if we use this data source and an algorithm that we would believe it is that works, we can test this out, and after a few weeks we would be able to estimate, is this something that will actually work? But if we look at a pilot solution, so this is what I mean with that is really a solution that can be used by an end user. So generally a pilot is something that you roll out to a number of your employees or a number of users, and this would be really an end-to-end solution. So at Radix, what we try to do is we build solutions that are fully functioning from the start. So meaning that we would also take care of building the mobile app that surrounds it, or making a solution that's really usable within the workflow of the employee. So that would be meant by a pilot, and that's why this would take generally more time, so up to a few months rather than a few weeks to get to such a fully working solution. So yeah, important to know there, AI is a set of tools. It's not a solution by itself, so it always needs to be combined with the software around it, the UX, UI, something that can be used by an end user. So I see 2 questions. So the first one from Victor: how can you measure the impact of each use case, and can you give a provisional impact to be able to prioritize? So the way that we measure the impact is either by looking at examples of similar projects that we've already done in the same industry, preferably, if not in a different but similar industry. So we try to find out what kind of improvements we have been able to generate from these use cases, from these projects that we've done. So what we want to do at each project is identify success criteria, impact measures from the start. So from the beginning, assess, for example, for the summarization case, assess how long does it take to build a summarized report. Let's say this takes a human about 10 hours. And then we measure once we have our first results. Once we have our first functioning product, how fast does this process now go? So that is how we measure the impact. Now, how we estimate the impact for the use cases that we have, of course, we have not done them exactly the same, and each context is different. So that is, there we base ourselves on the kind of data, the kind of AI readiness of the team, and the previous examples that we've worked with. And next question is from Alexandra. So how do you know that it'll take exactly this much time to deliver a solution? What's your way to determine how fast it will be done? So again, this is why we gave this range of 2 to 4 weeks or 3 to 5 months. So this is based on how much work does it generally take to prepare the data. What does the data for this client or this industry typically look like? So how much data preparation do we need? How much modeling, how much retraining do we need before we're able to see results? And also what is the effect of, so once we have the AI solution, there is also the part of building the rest of the solution around it. So not just the algorithms, but also having the fully functioning application.
Christine, you can see that we got 3 questions in the Q&A section, so I've also pasted them here in the chat.
Okay, thank you. So what kind of information do you need for the planning? I would assume that this is about the production planning case. For example, for production planning, you would need inventory data, production capacities, order management data, but of course, this is really dependent on each case as well. Moving on, so how many projects are successful from this process? So how many projects? So I don't have the exact figure on how many projects out of fast discovery are currently in production. If we look at the number of projects that made it to production at Radix, we say that this is about 60%. So 60% of our projects made it from that proof of concept stage to a stage where it's actually used by end users now. And another question from the Q&A was, 2 hours doesn't sound like a lot of time to understand the business. What if time runs out before we get to the end of the workshop? So this is something that, that happens frequently. So I'm not sure that I mentioned somewhere 2 hours. Generally, this is not something that we would put a time on. So this wouldn't necessarily be a workshop of 2 hours. We really want to take our time. This could even take a number of days together with our client to be able to get to the outputs that we need. Like this might be just one workshop, but it might be that we also need to look at data sources before we can estimate the complexity of a certain use case. Could be that we need to interview some people who weren't present in the workshop. So indeed, in 2 hours, understanding a business would be quite short. Another way that we ensure that we have a good understanding of the business is by having people from different parts of the client present. So different departments, just to be able to know from these different departments how the organization precisely works. So having a group of people that can combine their knowledge always helps. And then another question, we've done a few of these exercises and often end up with great ideas, but the road to execution and production is the difficult part. How do you manage this? Generating ideas is generally the easy part, but following up on the ideas is a lot harder. So what helps there is by doing this prioritization exercise. So I think I showed the grid with the 4 types of use cases based on their business value and complexity. So this helps to see which use cases are the easiest to get started with. And this also helps to see which use cases are connected to each other. And once you know that use cases are connected, then you can also see which ones make sense to group together. So this helps to get to this execution faster. Do we have any other questions? If not, I want to thank you for being present today. We hope you enjoyed the session. And if you have any further questions later on, feel free to reach out. Thank you. Have a nice day.